My name's Gemma Oakes. I'm 45 years old, a PR director in London, and I was diagnosed with breast cancer in August 2021.
Gemma, how did you receive your diagnosis?
My diagnosis was received, first off, I found a lump and was aware of a lump. I just wasn't sure what it was. And as the weeks sort of passed by, I became a bit more aware and obviously concerned that it probably was breast cancer. So I went into it with that mindset. I'd almost like self-diagnosed, or I had self-diagnosed, there's no almost about it. Went to the GP, they told me that they obviously couldn't tell me that it was breast cancer, but they backed up that I was in the right mindset. I was preparing myself in case that was the end scenario. And then chose to be treated by the Royal Marsden Hospital, went through a series of tests from mammograms to biopsies. It all happens on the same day, so the more tests you go through, the more you realise what diagnosis you're probably going to get, because if it was just a mammogram, you kind of know that that's not going to show everything. But having the mammogram and then having the biopsy and then other sort of tests on the same day, I'd already got it into my head that this was going to be the diagnosis. But in terms of actually being told, went away from that day and had an appointment on the Monday. The tests I think were on the Tuesday or Wednesday, and they said to me, do you want a phone call if we get the results back on Friday before the weekend? And I said, yeah, I'd rather not wait, the full weekend. And a nurse actually told me on the phone on the Friday that it was breast cancer.
Just a little question. From the moment you said when you felt that lump, from then to when you actually saw the doctor, what was the gap between that?
It's probably close to 2 months,
Yeah.
which I would now have done the opposite. Not that, fortunately for me, it didn't change my diagnosis, but I think for anybody that finds anything, you realise that you really should go and get it looked at as quickly as possible, because sometimes it's not cancer. Like, I think we all have it in our head that it's worst case scenario, but many times it's not cancer, so the sooner you can go. But I was quite emotionally led by my decision of, in the first instance, it was, is it just time of the month? Is it just, there wasn't a big lump there. Is it just a change in my body? Will it change over the next couple of weeks? Then, as it didn't change, and actually I could feel that it was actually getting, physically feel it was getting bigger. That's when the emotional kicked in of, well, I've got my mum's birthday in the next couple of weeks. We're going to Cornwall on holiday for 2 weeks. I don't want them to have this news right now. I'll sort it when I get back. And I did, we went to Cornwall, came back from Cornwall, went straight to the GP. So not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Should definitely go and get it looked at. But again, it's like human behaviour, isn't it?
Life just gets in the way. And
Yeah,
you don't
completely.
Want to.
You said you received a phone call. Were you by yourself?
Yeah. So they phoned me on the Friday, but I still had to go and have the face-to-face appointment with the surgeon on the Monday. So didn't tell any of my family immediately. Told, even when I found the lump, I only told one person. I told my best friend. And he was, aware of what was going on. Told him on the Friday that it was breast cancer, but I would find out in the appointment on Monday exactly what the treatment plan would be, what stage it was, more detail about it. And then when I went in for the appointment on the Monday, he was the only person that I'd still told, because I'd decided that I didn't want to tell my family until I knew exactly what the treatment plan was. I wanted to go to them with the solution, not the problem, which is typical Gem PR director of be the problem solver. But I just didn't want to just give them the news and then have to wait a series of weeks and more tests and more appointments before we knew exactly, when I would start treatment, what the treatment would be, and whether or not I felt okay about the treatment. That sort of plan didn't quite work out, because I had to start chemo quite quickly. I literally started chemo within days, and my family live in Wales, so where I had planned to go home and tell my mum and dad face to face, I didn't end up getting the chance to do that. I told my sisters first, and then they sat my mum and dad down and told them, because I had to start chemo. And by the time mum and dad were told, I'd actually already started chemo, which was my choice again, because again, I didn't want them to worry. So if I could tell them, this is the diagnosis, this is the treatment, and I've had the first chemo session and I feel all right, or this is what's happening, I felt I was giving them facts rather than making them worry about me, which of course then my mum and dad said they were going to worry anyway.
So you obviously had to start chemo straight away because the diagnosis was that of stage 4?
No, it was stage 2B.
Oh my!
It was a HER2, or what is known as a HER2 tumour, and it was a HER2 is an aggressive form of tumour, which is why it grew so quickly. But it grew to 6 centimetres. So strangely, at the same hospital, probably about 2 weeks before, Julia Bradbury would have had her diagnosis with exactly the same surgeon. She had a HER2 tumour, hers was 6 centimetres, and she had a mastectomy followed by whatever course of treatment. Whereas for me, it was a different course of treatment. It was chemo, then surgery, and then radiotherapy.
So that will tell you each case is individual.
And that's the biggest thing I think that you learn, is that I chose not to go on forums because even though I had self-diagnosed, it wasn't self-diagnosed as in I jumped online and started looking at other cases, other symptoms. So at the whole process, I've literally just listened to what the doctors and the nurses have told me about my body, about my breast cancer, because I think you can get so caught up in what's happening to other people, but ultimately it is different for everybody, and everybody responds to the treatments, has different symptoms, has a different journey and handles it differently. So you just have to sort of focus on yourself.
And going through the treatment, dealing with that yourself, could you give any advice to anybody that's about to go through that treatment, of your experience?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, again, I would say it's definitely, just because this is how it felt to me doesn't mean to say that's how it's going to feel to somebody else.
Yeah.
But I think your support system around you, whether they're there physically or whether they're there on the end of a phone, is really important, because you need people to lift you, you need people to pull you out of moods, because I think with chemo, for me, it did bring on some quite dark moods at times, and having like really upbeat, positive people that continued to treat me as Gem was so important during that period. But what I would say is, if you've got the option to, like, I'm incredibly fortunate, and I would never have said this before, but I am fortunate that I haven't got children and that I haven't got a partner to think about, because for somebody that would have to go and have chemo and then go home and put a brave face on for their kids or look after their kids or even carry on working, I had the luxury of a company that looked after me, so I didn't have to worry about that. I could work when I felt okay to work, and I had that flexibility. But not having, children to look after or any codependence made it, I could actually just focus on myself, and that's what you actually need to do, is literally look after yourself. If you feel rubbish, allow yourself to feel rubbish. If you need to sleep. If you don't feel like eating, I lost my appetite quite a bit, and it took me the first couple of weeks to really find that my weight dropped quite considerably, because I just generally struggled eating on chemotherapy. And then one of our clients is Weetabix, and it was Weetabix that became my staple food, because it mushes up, it's like baby food, so it went down my throat really easy. It was really easy, and also I knew that there's fibre, there's protein in it. I'm putting something to try and get some strength back from chemo. But you find stuff. It's, people can say to you, make sure you do this, make sure you do that. But ultimately, I think when you're in the moment, just take the best care you can of yourself. And that doesn't mean to say you've got to suddenly completely overhaul your diet. If you are struggling to eat, the last thing you want to be thinking is, I've got to eat everything right. You've just got to get goodness into you. But if it turns out that it's just anything you could put into you, like Weetabix, which fortunately is good, then you're going to be all right. But it's trying not to overthink it as much as anything.
When you were going through your treatment, that was during COVID, or was it just at the end of COVID?
So it was... probably COVID was officially supposed to have been done, but then we had that massive increase of cases last Christmas. So I was diagnosed in the August of last year. Then my treatment started in September, and at the hospital, people weren't allowed. You still weren't allowed I'd call it a +1. I'm not sure it's the best invite, but you still weren't allowed people with you unless it was in sort of certain cases where you were given permission. So I went on my own to all of the appointments, you know, had the diagnosis on my own, went to the treatment on my own. But again, that was sort of my choice to do it because, again, it sounds selfish, but you have to be selfish in that situation. That I only had to think about myself. I only had to think about myself getting to the hospital. I only had to think about myself while I was having treatment. And the one thing you do see now that the world's opened up a little bit and you can see that people have got, you know, people with them, you can see that fear in their loved ones, and you can see that they're sort of, you know, willing their friend or relative on. And for me, I literally could just focus on myself if I wanted. It's funny because they always say to you, when you go to chemo, make sure you pack a bag, make sure that you've maybe got a film to watch or books to read. I would take stuff with me, and I never ended up picking up a book or watching anything because I was too busy chatting to either other patients or the nursing staff, because I wanted to be present in the room. I wanted to, you know, talk to people and see people and find out what their journey was as well and what their experience was. And when you could see when somebody wanted to be quiet and, you know, wanted to be left alone, but you could also recognise, there was one lady, she was 95 and she was having chemo, and it was the third time she'd had breast cancer and the third time she'd had chemo. But she was hilarious. Like, she she'd literally be like, I still have my whiskey when I get home. And I was like, how you do that? I've got no idea, because I literally was on my Weetabix. I was like, how are you drinking whiskey? But those characters are what lift you and what sort of drive you through. And it was important to me that I wouldn't say I was a character, but I was one of the people in the room that wanted to lift people and wanted to just, like, you know, give somebody a smile across the room. That was just, you know, my little way of being like, it's going to be all right.
And do you think because you were there on your own, you made more bonds or more friendships?
Definitely.
Because, you know, you were making an effort with the others that were going through the same thing without the people in the middle, I guess, that were trying to get your attention or trying to look after you and not
completely. Because I made friends in the waiting room. There were people in the waiting room that I'd look out for, like, and I'd look for when I was going back to different appointments. We had most of my chemo appointments on a Wednesday, so we had like the Wednesday crew, and there'd be faces that you sort of recognise, and there'd be people that had been there longer than you, and then there'd be people that, you know, you'd get sort of 3 months in and you'd sort of see the new starters and the new faces coming in. So you sort of went through transitions of like different people. But in terms of like the nursing staff, it's called the medical day unit, which is the chemo ward. They were my tribe, like from the people that did your bloods to the people on reception through to the security. Like, I'd speak to everybody. And the amazing thing, even with the security guards, we were going in with masks, but they always recognised me. They'd always be like, and they'd always tease me because they'd always be like, you've got a beautiful smile. Obviously they couldn't see my smile because I had a mask on. But from the moment you walked in the door, you had people lifting you. Yeah. And I just think that sort of carried on through the nursing staff of just the care they gave me, the laughs we had, which seems strange to say when you're having chemo, but you know, we did have some laughs.
What stage are you at now with your treatments?
So I had 5 months of chemo.
Yeah.
Then had surgery at the end of April, had a lumpectomy, then had 3 weeks of radiotherapy in July, and last November I started having these 3 weekly injections, which basically help reduce the risk of the tumour coming back after surgery or coming back longer term. So I've got 3 of those injections left, so all treatment completely will end on the 7th of November.
Wow, how do you feel about that?
Another milestone. I think that's how you sort of see it. Like, you celebrate the little wins, and I'd be so happy to end treatment. But as I was saying to the nursing staff when I was in last week, I'm going to miss them.
Yeah.
It sounds so daft, but I'm kind of like, I will miss going in and seeing them, because it's almost, when people have had such an incredible impact on your life, your well-being, your health, you know, they've got me through this. Yeah. To feel that you're probably never going to see them again just seems completely odd, because that wouldn't happen in any other form of your life. If
and
somebody,
they probably understand you in a way that other people might not.
Yeah,
well, they understand what you've been through.
A few weeks ago, I was reading the text message that I actually told my sisters and my brother-in-law by text, my diagnosis, because I wanted them all to hear it at the first time, and I didn't want one sister to find out before the other sister. So I created this new group, and I reread the message a few weeks ago that I sent, and it was very matter of fact about, this is what's happening, this is what's going on. But I remember saying to them, like, that I didn't really like using the word cancer, and that I didn't want to be seen as a cancer patient, which now I don't feel that way. I almost feel like there's a renewed pride of it was cancer. That's factual. That's not a swear word. It's not a horrible word. It is what it is. Yeah. But in terms of being a cancer patient, I am proud of what I've been through. I'm proud of what I've achieved. I'm proud of the friendships, the people I have in my life. So it's funny how throughout the whole process you sort of change your outlook.
What did you call the group?
Gem.
Okay. I'm just curious. Lifestyle, obviously, as we now know, plays a really big part in our health and in certain diagnoses. If you were to step back now, would you change anything in your lifestyle or do everything the same?
I think not just in lifestyle, I think generally I wouldn't change anything because I think everything happens for a reason. So that's the only reason I wouldn't change anything at all, because it sounds contrite to say that I'm glad I went through the experience, but what I've learned from the experience about myself, it's going to pay me dividends in the future. Like, I've never felt so calm, I've never felt so happy. Amazing. Because of what I've achieved, my mindset, just the whole process. But ultimately, there's so many myths surrounding cancer. Like, even when I first had my diagnosis and I sat down with you're allocated a breast cancer care nurse, and mine was a lady called Sarah, who I told her, I was like, if there's any awards for best patient, you need to tell me what the criteria is. I was like, this is what I'm going for. And we'd have a laugh and a joke throughout the whole of the last year, where she was like, you've won it, you're my best patient. So I was like, yes. But I remember one of the first things I said to her was, is it sugar? Is it sugar in my diet? And she was like, it's not your diet. And I think it's different for different people, because for some people it is potentially hormonal. It could be that it's hereditary. For me, it wasn't. I had gene tests, and it wasn't hereditary. But I do think what I've learned from the whole experience is that my body is my home. So now, not just physically, am I more conscious of what I'm putting in me, and I'm, obviously more conscious of like my fitness and my health physically. My mindset was one of the most important things that I've been working on, because I do think that your mindset, stress, overthinking, anxiety, it can eat you up inside. Yeah. So I'm not saying that gives you cancer, but what I would say is just being more mindful of myself and looking after myself and kinder to myself in all those different areas will hopefully pay me dividends in the future. And I wouldn't want anybody else to have to go through what I've got to learn those lessons.
Yeah. One question that the Piluca asked before was about people that want to support you. And what advice would you give them? Because like we said, you don't know what to say to somebody. You want to say the right things. Maybe you overthink that a little bit too much. What would you say to somebody that really wants to be there for you? They don't know what to say to you. What do you want from them?
Yeah, I think it's different from different people, to be honest. But I think it's not... I wouldn't worry about what to say, because it's almost then you're projecting your own feelings onto somebody else. Ultimately, just saying I'm thinking of you is enough. Like, I had... I had brilliant friends, but like there's there's a fair few people that stand out, but there's one friend who I don't see that often. He lives in Manchester, and we met through work, but he would send me voice notes every single week, checking in with me, making sure I was okay, telling me I was beautiful, telling me how proud he was. And every time I received those voice notes, it just completely lifted me. And I had another friend who he was in Covent Garden, and he sent me a meditation book, and he was like, I saw this and I thought of you. Such a simple gift, but to me it was like, in that moment he thought of me. It's those little acts of kindness that if you are struggling with what to say, just send somebody a card, or the smallest things, the smallest gestures are actually, they have the biggest impact on you. And there were things that I didn't like personally. Like, I didn't like it when people say, you've got this, which is weird because lots of people say it, but I was kind of like, today I haven't. I was like, not every day are you going to have it. And I had people saying, you're Wonder Woman. I was like, no, I'm not. I'm just trying to deal with this situation to the best of my ability. So I don't necessarily think there's anything that you shouldn't say. If anything, if you genuinely don't know what to say that to the person. Say, look, I don't know what to say, but be careful not to project your emotions onto that person.
Yeah. because it's not their time.
And it's just a
yours.
time for kindness. That's
Yeah.
all it is. There'll be different people in your life that will play a bigger role and probably a more physical role in terms of, you know, being company or massaging your feet or, you know, like making you a meal. But there'll be other people that just that little text at the right time or that little gesture or sending you a song. I had friends that would send me videos of their kids playing and laughing because I was like, I just wanted positivity around me. And
Yeah.
even on my Instagram, I went through my Instagram and got rid of following anything that felt negative or toxic or not authentic, and replaced it with things that when I saw them would make me laugh or make me feel uplifted, because I wanted to surround myself with the best.
Which is a good way to live your life anyway.
Generally,
isn't it?
exactly. Well, that's the point, and I think that's the biggest
all
thing.
do
It's
that.
almost like I think that's the thing. It's like there's things that I'm saying that you could put into a box of how to deal with cancer, but actually it's almost tools for everyday life and how you react to things, how you don't react to things, and that ultimately all you can do is your best. I remember somebody saying to me years ago, when people say, you know, put 100% into it, sometimes you haven't got 100%. Sometimes you're only operating at 80%. But if you put 80% into it, because that's what you've got, that's enough because you're putting your best into it. And weirdly, that's how I felt about cancer. I was like, I've just got to do the best I can to get myself through this, whatever that entails.
Yeah. So you've come away from this whole experience mentally, from what I can hear, a lot stronger. Physically, with the differences, have you had any major physical differences that you can talk about? Yeah,
so definitely mentally stronger, but physically, from the most obvious is the lumpectomy. So at the moment, I still have, I had like the most amazing surgeon. He was absolutely brilliant. But I've got like a small scar over my left nipple. And then there's, because it was a 6 centimetre tumour, the chemo took it down to just over 3 centimetres, but that's still a big tumour. I've got a dent in my left breast, which I'm kind of used, like it doesn't bother me at all. But then there are other things that I still have to live with. So there's things that you don't realise until afterwards, like you could get joint pain because of the chemotherapy. You know, obviously radiotherapy and chemo both kill all of your good cells as well as killing the cancer cells. So there's, you know, in terms of, I can be short of breath sometimes, but hopefully it will all come back. And I think, you know, as I said, I finished radiotherapy at the end of July, so that was almost a year of treatment by that point, an intense treatment. I'm still having the injections up until November. Really, it will probably take about a year to recover from this. So I think, again, it's learning to be patient with myself. I might not be having all the hospital appointments anymore, and I might be out of the worst of it, but ultimately I've still got a longer journey to go on in terms of, you know, getting my energy back over the next 12 months.
You were telling us a really sweet story about when you embraced the fact that you got rid of your hair.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that again, because that was very endearing.
So when you first go to chemo, they tell you about how you can wear these cold caps, and it's like a brain freeze. If you drink a slush puppy really, really fast, that's what it kind of feels like. And most people, I imagine, go into it thinking, I will put up with this horrible thing on my head for about 2.5 hours while I'm having chemotherapy because my hair is going to stay in place. Very rarely does people's hair stay in place, or if it does, it saves maybe 30% of your hair. So I clung on. I did it once, and I was like, I'm not bothering with this. I was like, it's too much of a faff. It's like, if I lose my hair, I lose my hair. It's not the end of the world. But I hung on to my hair because it was like it stayed at the front. So I'd have like big knitted hairbands on that sort of covered the back. But I kept it at the front for as long as possible, and then just before Christmas it was like, right, come on, let's get this shaved off. And my best friend did it for me in my kitchen, and we, as I said to you earlier, you see all these videos on TikTok and Instagram with these really like lovely touching moments of, you know, people crying or the perfect song playing as they're having their head shaved. We just roared with laughter. It was so ridiculous. The light was on the dimmer switch. It should have been on bright. I had a little tuft left at the front because he didn't have his glasses on when he was doing it. But it was just the perfect way of doing it because it genuinely didn't bother me. And he'd been telling me for like months, your hair doesn't define you. And weirdly, when I saw myself in the mirror, there were still no tears, and there never were. There was never a point where I sat there thinking, oh, I look ugly or I look like that, because I was just grateful that I was alive. It was like that was
Yeah.
the least of my problems. And I think the one thing, like people tell you about losing your eyebrows, losing your eyelashes, losing your hair, they don't tell you about losing your nasal hair, which would be the most helpful advice anybody could give you. Because if you look in a chemo ward or you look in a waiting room of a cancer hospital, everybody's holding tissues, because obviously without nasal hair,
Wow.
your nose constantly runs.
Yep.
So we're all sat there trying to catch, stop our noses from running. But I was like, why does nobody tell you about that? Why do they focus on the physical things as opposed to the actual functional hairs that you have on your body?
Because I've never heard that before, but now that makes total sense.
It's not anywhere. I went away and Googled it because I was like, because it was literally like, how long does it take for nasal hair to grow back? It does not exist. But I can tell you, it probably takes about 4 months.
First-hand experience. I think it's really important for people to learn through your experiences as well, from whatever stage they're at, whether they're dealing with a family member or themselves. And we're so grateful that you've come and spoken to us today so that we can share your story. So that's all we really want to say. Thank you so much, Gemma,
Very
for
welcome.
coming in. And
Thank you.
take care.